Good morning, everybody. This is Mrs. Kip back with our last lesson about animals and their habitats. Today, we're going to learn about habitat destruction and endangered species. If you don't know what an endangered species is, it is a species present in such small numbers that in the future may no longer exist. So there's not many of that animal left. So it's endangered. It's in danger of becoming extinct. And when a species becomes extinct, it means they are all dead. There is none left. So in today's lesson, we will explain why living things live in habitats to which they are particularly suited. We will identify the characteristics of the bald eagle's habitat. A bald eagle is an endangered species. And we will explain why and how habitat destruction can cause extinction. All right, here we go. Our last trip with Rattenborough. Here he is. He's an astronaut today, floating around the Earth. Rattenborough here, delivering the final installment of our exciting habitats adventure. We have traveled all around the world looking at some of the different habitats where plants and animals live. A lot of those habitats, such as the Arctic and the Sonoran Desert, have climates to which you and I would have a tough time adapting. As we've seen, however, there are different living things in each habitat we have visited. Because some living things are so well adapted to the specific conditions of their specific habitats, any large change in their surroundings could make it hard for them to survive. Just think what would happen if I got even a little colder in the desert. Some of those animals who are so good at keeping cool wouldn't know how to stay warm. Or what if it stopped raining in the rainforest? What would happen to all those plants that need lots of water? Or what if something happened to disrupt the food chain of a certain animal? If that animal relied on a certain type of plant or animal to eat, then that food source was taken out of the habitat, that animal would no longer have food it needs to survive. Sometimes habitats change because the temperature or the weather changes, but unfortunately, people often affect habitats as well. Whether they realize it or not, people can make it very difficult for plants and animals to survive. You can see all of these. From cutting down trees or starting forest fires to dumping dangerous waste and chemicals into our rivers, people's actions can endanger lots of species and plants and animals. So like I said earlier, to endanger plants and animals means to put them in danger's way. So people's actions can harm or even kill lots of plants and animals. Sometimes people's actions destroy entire habitats. To destroy something means to ruin it or to break it. For example, someone walking into a forest might light a match and drop it, and then the whole forest might burn. Even if they were not harmed by the fire itself, many animals that used to live in trees would no longer have a place to live. When they lose their homes, animals find it much harder to continue to live in a particular habitat. If they can't find new places to live, the animals will not survive. After a while, there will be fewer and fewer of these kinds of animals alive in the wild. When that happens, we say they have become an endangered species. We say these species are endangered for a very good reason. They are in danger of extinction or dying out forever. An animal or plant that is extinct has died out and does not exist anywhere in the world. Like dinosaurs are extinct. There are no living dinosaurs left on the earth. And we don't want that to happen to animals that are still living on the earth, because once they're all gone, we can't get them back. So here's a beautiful bald eagle. I'm on a mission to tell you about one animal that can teach us a lot about endangered species and how to save them. I have come here to Washington State in the northwestern part of the United States to show you an amazing bird called a bald eagle. Look up at that tree there, and you will see one of these eagles perched on the very top branch. You may recognize the bald eagle because it's one of the national symbols of our country. Drawings of the eagle appear as a symbol on American money and in many other places. Believe it or not, the bald eagle was almost extinct in the United States several years ago. If that had happened, there would be no bald eagles still living today. So we're grateful to be able to spot this bald eagle today. Ooh, there he is flying. Look how cool he is. Bald eagles are scavengers. Remember, that means they'll eat things that are already dead. They'll eat another animal's leftovers that are left on the ground. But they also eat rats and other small animals, so I'd better stay out of the way. I think the bald eagle looks very grand, don't you? It's covered with dark brown feathers, and its head and tail are both white. Bald eagles are some of the largest birds living in this country. They can grow up to 3 feet tall, which is almost as tall as a first grader. Wow, this one has just taken off into the air, and you can see that it's huge wings. In fact, their wings can spread to about 8 feet in length. While this eagle is flying around, let me tell you more about these endangered birds. Wow, I didn't know once their wings are out, that's more than 8 feet across. Whew. It's big. This is called a housing development. This is where a bunch of people live, like a giant neighborhood. There used to be thousands of bald eagles in the United States, but farmers started to hunt them because they thought the eagles were killing their farm animals. Then, later people started to cut down trees in which the bald eagles built their nests to make way for roads, houses, and shopping malls. With fewer places for them to make their homes, eagles found it harder and harder to survive, and they started to die out. Soon there weren't very many bald eagles left in the whole United States. People started to notice that there were fewer and fewer bald eagles, and they decided to find out why. Scientists began to study the eagles, and they discovered 2 things. The first was that a lot of eagles didn't have enough room to build their nests. Eagles do not like to live in the same area as other eagles, so they build their nests far away from each other. They like places that are very peaceful, that they need huge, strong trees that can hold nests big enough for the adults and their babies to live. The scientists discovered that the eagles didn't have enough room in the areas where they had been living because people were chopping down trees in order to build more roads and buildings. People were destroying the bald eagle's habitat. Here's a picture of a farm and a big piece of farm equipment. Spraying the plants with something. The other things that scientists found out was that something bad was getting into the bald eagle's food supply. Farmers sometimes use chemicals to keep bugs from eating their crops. One chemical, though, made the eggs that the eagles laid much thinner and easier to break. Because of this, many eagle eggs were breaking before they could hatch. No one knew before then that the chemical was hurting the eagles, but it was. There's some of the bald eagle's eggs. Luckily, the scientists found out which chemical was harming the eagle's eggs. Using the scientists' information, the United States government made laws to protect the bald eagles and its habitat, so that the eagle's food no longer contained the harmful chemical. Thanks to these laws, more eagles were born, and the numbers of eagles started to rise again. Now, bald eagles have made an amazing comeback, but people must always be careful to protect their habitat. This bald eagle has returned to its nest up in a tree. Maybe it has some chicks up there that it needs to feed, or maybe it's just trying to keep warm. It's pretty chilly. And speaking of returning to the nest, I'm afraid it's time for me to go home now. I've really enjoyed our trip around the world's habitats, and I hope you have too. Mrs. Rattenborough and my kids miss me, and to tell the truth, it's been a dangerous expedition for me. I'm glad to get out of danger and into safety of my lovely home under the steps. Home sweet home. Or maybe I should say habitat, sweet habitat. So that was our last trip with Rattenborough. He's going to go home. All right, so let's go over some questions. And then tomorrow we are going to start a whole new domain on fairy tales. So that will be fun. Before we do that, let's go over these questions. Can you tell me what an endangered species is? What is an endangered species? An endangered species is a species that could die out because there are so few still living. What is extinction? Remember we said dinosaurs are extinct. So what does it mean to be extinct? That means the plant or the animal has died out completely. There are no more of them left. Why do changes in an animal's habitat make it hard for it to survive? Remember in this read aloud they said farmers were using a chemical on their crops that was affecting the eagles in some way, or people that were chopping down so many trees to build housing developments or buildings. How is that affecting the animals that lived in that habitat? So like when there's a forest somewhere and somebody comes down and chops down all the trees so they can put up big buildings or houses, the animals are already so well adapted to the habitat that they live in that then they can't adapt or make changes to the new conditions of their habitat. So if they live in a tree and all the trees are cut down, they can't adapt to that, so they can't survive. What are some things that could cause a habitat to change? Changes in the temperature, changes in the weather, or people's actions like chopping trees down. Habitat can also change from global warming. All the icebergs in the Arctic that we learned about that polar bears like to live on. Global warming's making those melt. So the polar bears are running out of places to live. And that's affecting their habitat. And it could affect their species. They could become an endangered species. If they might already be actually. I'll look that up and get back to you. Why do you think it's important to protect animals' habitats? Why do you think it's important to protect their habitats? I think it's important to protect animals' habitats because it's not fair to go in and take away their home because we want to build something else there. We would have a hard time adapting if somebody came in and said, I'm going to tear their house down because I want to put something else there. That's our home and we're well adapted to living there. It would be hard for us to go find somewhere else to live.